Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. I'm just coming back from getting my sheep hunter in Unit 44B North in Arizona, getting his ram checked out at the Arizona Game and Fish. I had a great hunt with Dave Moore. Dave Moore owns William, Larkin, and Moore. It's a collectible antique gun shop. One of the best in the country there in Scottsdale, Arizona. And Dave had applied for 25 years in Arizona for Desert Sheep, and he finally drew. He did not have max points, but he was just under, and he drew Unit 44B North, and we just got off a great hunt. Actually, the hunt, Dave was able to harvest his ram at about 10 o'clock, maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock on opening morning. And the ram, the story with the ram, it really threw me for a loop. Some friends of mine from Yuma, Kent Inglet, Melvin Lee, and Scott Fisher, had been out over the summer and through the fall doing some scouting, what have you, and they kept seeing this one ram that Kent really liked, and it was kind of funny. He actually sent a text to me and everybody and Dave and said, "Nobody's responding to my text. Does anybody like this ram?" And of course everybody was at the time busy, and then we started chiming in, "Yeah, we like him." And it was kind of funny because here he is looking at a great ram and no one's responding to him. But anyway, fast forward, make a long story short, they had seen this ram several times in this area, and Kent knew he was a really good ram. And he's one of those rams that, you know, even when you see in person, he doesn't just jump out at you as, you know, a 170 plus type ram, or at least it didn't to me. And the first time I saw the ram, he was facing away, looked like he had really good mass in the back, and which they all do, though. You know, the worst look that you want is looking at a ram from behind. But you know, he kind of moved around a little bit, and I was sitting next to Mel Lee, and you know, he was talking about how when they see the ram's head's kind of cocked, and they weren't sure if it was, you know, some sort of inner ear problem or eye problem or what. And it turns out that this ram actually had a blind right eye. When I put the spotting scope, make a long story short, my nephew Jay Pyburn and I actually hiked up on a knob and got probably 350 yards from the ram to get a real good look at him. And when I put the spotting scope on the ram, I could tell that he had a blue eye, which I've seen before. And you know, whether they get hurt from headbutting or they poke their eye in a cactus or what have you, it was real apparent that this ram only had vision out of his left eye. And so in essence, he would cock his head to the right and kind of at an angle where he could have full vision with his left eye. Just picture if your right eye, you would probably kind of turn your head slightly to the right so that you had a wider field of view left and right, and that's what this ram did. But the reason it threw me for a loop is it was one of those rams that I just could not get my hands on, or the pulse. I couldn't get a wrap around the length of his horns. He had enough mass throughout his horn and in the middle of the horn that at times it made his horns look short. And the other challenge, which is something for all you sheep hunters that are still out there hunting, is you really have to be careful. You hear it time and time again, but you really have to be careful about field judging rams or any animal, a buck or a bull or whatever, that's all alone, because body size plays such a huge role in whether the horns look big or small, and using their body size to try and field judge accurately is always tough to do when they're alone. And this ram was all alone, and there was no other sheep around anywhere in the area. I mean, it's not even like we could pan back over 180 degrees and see some ewes or small rams or anything like that. This ram was literally by himself. And so as a sheep hunter, a sheep guide, you know, it's always really scary to try and evaluate a ram that is all alone. And so, you know, I kept really grinding over the numbers, kept really looking at it. And, you know, that mass throughout the horn at times, especially when his head was down and kind of at a quartering away angle and such, it made the horns look short. I really thought the horns were like 33 and a half and 34, maybe 34 and a half. Had a little bit longer horn on his right side. On his left side, had a little bit longer horn than his right. And, you know, I just couldn't get my arms around the length. But we knew he was a good ram. And Dave, you know, really liked the ram as well. And then Corky Richardson's dad, George, had one of the other tags in the unit. And Russ, the grandson of George, Corky's son, had actually been running a bunch of trail cameras in the unit. And so I was able to get with Russ and kind of go over the trail cameras, because, you know, what you want to do is be shooting an old ram, but you also want to be shooting one of the bigger rams in the unit. And it really helped by looking at the trail camera pictures to see that, you know, this ram, regardless of score, I only saw one ram that was bigger, what I thought was, you know, bigger or the same size as the ram we were looking at. So that's another takeaway for you guys, is anything you're hunting, if you can shoot the biggest thing you can find, that's one thing. But if you have a sense of, either by scouting and knowing inventory and all the rams in the unit, and or running trail cameras where you have a good sense of what else is out there, if you're shooting the biggest thing that you know of, pretty good chance it's going to be you know, the best you can do in the unit, or definitely in the top, you know, couple percent of rams in the unit. And, you know, I kept looking at the bases, and the bases to me look small. And that's another thing. When you look at the bases and they look small, and even though a ram might carry out really good mass throughout their horn, when they start out small, it's really hard for a ram to get big. What you want to see is real puffy, real big bases, and then have them taper from there. But if you start big, in essence, if your first measurement, which is your base measurement, starts really big, it usually will surprise you as you taper down the horn. But when you start small, I was thinking the bases were right around 14, maybe just a hair over, which they turned out to be 14.2 and 14.3. You really got to watch that. You got to watch that with small bases, it makes the horns look longer than they really are. And with small bases, even though it looks massive throughout the horn, you know, you're starting at 14.2, you know, you are going to taper down. No rams actually get bigger after the bases. So, I mean, that's as big a measurement as you're going to get. So if you can start with a 16-inch base and taper, that's way better than starting with a 14 and 2/8 inch base. Regardless, we determined that this ram was going to be a great ram for Dave to harvest. So Dave said that, yeah, he wanted to shoot that ram. And so the trick was trying to keep our eye on it until dark, and also splitting up and spreading out and trying to find other rams that might beat that ram or be better than that ram. So we used that as a benchmark to say, you know, if this afternoon, if we can find any other rams bigger, let's go ahead and just keep looking. And Kent went ahead and stayed on the ram and watched the ram till dark while we were looking for rams that might be bigger, just trying to cover all our bases. Now Dave, when he was 18 years old, got in a car accident and actually is paralyzed from the waist down. And Dave hunts all over the world. I think he's been to Africa 4 or 5 times. I believe he's already shot 4, 5, 6 animals already this year. He shot elk in New Mexico and antelope, and He hunts all the time, but he had a champ permit, which allows him to hunt out of a vehicle. And so this was the first time I've been involved with a champ permit situation. And so that also played into a factor of the ram was in a place where there were no other sheep, and he was fairly stationary. And there were several times the day before the season that if it would have been the season, that we could have probably driven up and, kind of gotten in position and gotten a shot. But that also played a factor in that our mobility factor was going to be limited as to, hiking around and such. So we were going to have to shoot a ram from the road, no matter if we shot him on the first day or the 14th day or the 30th day. And so that played a huge role. But this ram threw me for a loop because I thought, I could not get him much over 165 inches. I'm always accused by Hadar and all my hunting buddies of being way too conservative and, really trying to nitpick something. And, I actually kind of take pride in that. But I did not think the ram was as big as he was. When I would add up my numbers using like 14 as the baseline for his bases, it quickly, the mass portion quickly gets smaller from there. And I was getting 33 and a half, 34 and a half as lengths. I just couldn't get this ram as big as he is. But the other factor was I was really, really scared that his body was a small-bodied ram. And when Friday came and we had to wait for the ram to come off the mountain and come down into a more huntable area, we got to look at him, and I will tell you, on Thursday the ram was it was cloudy, the sun wasn't as bright, and he looked way better on opening day when the sun was shining on his horn. He's got really yellow horns, and you could really see a lot of the mass, and he definitely, all of us agreed that he looked way better with the sun on him than he had in the shade. We knew that the ram I was thinking that he was, for sure 8.5. I thought possibly 9.5 years old. Looking at his 4-year ring about even with his ear. And that's, if you watch the videos on my Instagram, that's something sheep hunters need to look for. You need to look for that 4-year ring complex. That is when the ram is facing you, the 4-year, the darkest ring is about parallel with the ears, or excuse me, about in line with the ears. And I knew this was a mature ram. I was thinking he was right on the cusp of being a class 4 ram, which to be class 4 you have to be 9 and older. So I knew we were dealing with an old ram. Score was not as important, but I knew he was one of the better rams in the unit. And so we decided to go ahead and take him. So fast forward to opening morning, we waited for the ram for a couple hours. He had to come down the hill and get into a position where we could get at him. And Dave has his own razor, and he's got controls. He drives with his hands. And I said, okay, Dave, how's this going to go down? What kind of angle? And he was pointing out. He said, I'm going to sit in the passenger seat, Jay. You're going to drive. And he kind of gave me, I said, what kind of angle do you want when I pull up? Because we're going to probably be within about 300 yards of the ram. And he kind of gave me, the kind of 45-degree angle. He had shooting sticks that he was going to, have just outside the razor and pop down for a good rest. And we were actually able, it was perfect. The ram had dropped down into a little wash. So we pulled right up, and where we had good vantage, good field of firing position left and right. In other words, anywhere where the ram came out, we were going to have a good position to get a really good steady shot. And we actually pulled up there, and we probably had to wait maybe it felt like 30 minutes, but it was probably 5, maybe 10 minutes for the ram to feed out, and the ram fed out behind an ironwood tree, and he was just glistening in the sun. And Dave, we were looking. I said, he's going to come out behind that ironwood tree, and he says, I see him, and the rest is kind of history. He made a 250-yard shot. The ram went down in one shot, perfectly placed behind the shoulder, and it was just a awesome feeling to be able to get a ram and get a ram in that situation, in a controlled situation where we didn't have any other hunters around, and it just made for a really nice hunt. I will tell you, as soon as I walked up to the ram, I knew in my head, as soon as I was standing over the ram, which I've had other experiences where you get over an animal and they're a tiny body. When I stood over the ram, I knew right then and there that this ram had a really good, mature, big body. And I knew that we were just fine, when we were going to score the ram. I knew that he was actually going to be better than what I thought. And the ram, I've got the score sheet right here. The ram actually was aged between 10 and 11. His right horn is 36 even, 14 and 3/8 inch bases on the right, 14 and 2/8 first quarter, 13 even on his second quarter, 9 and 7. He's got really big third quarters. For a total of 87 and a half on the right side. His left side is 36 and 3/8, 14-2, 14, 12-6, and 9-6 for a total of 87 and an 8. So this ram gross scored 174 and 5/8 with 6/8 inches of deduction. He's 173 and 7/8. Turns out there were 3 tags in the unit. And he's the largest ram to be shot out of the 3 and the oldest ram to be shot out of the 3. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the age and the score. And it was just such a pleasure to hunt with Dave. Was able to pick his brain. I'm going to try and get him on a podcast to talk about guns. This guy has an amazing amount of knowledge about all kinds of guns and calibers and whatnot, and it was just so fun. He came in on Wednesday. We actually scouted Wednesday and Thursday, and then the hunt was on Friday. So I got to spend 3 full days with him, and just a wealth of knowledge. I encourage you guys, if you have any questions about collectible or antique side-by-side, any rifles, any side-by-side shotguns, give Dave a call. They buy and sell guns. He collects guns and is really just a gun nut, has huge amount of knowledge. His dad started the business over 50 years ago. His dad since passed, I believe, in 2011, and Dave and his brother own the business, but it's super well respected. I think this is his 32nd year at the Safari Club International convention. He's well known throughout the industry, so I highly recommend, if you guys have any questions about collectible or antique guns, to check out William Larkin and More website. You can call Dave, tell him nice sheep, and you've got some gun questions for him. Just a great guy. Was able to have my nephew Jay Pyburn on his first sheep hunt. It was always fun hunting with Jay. And like I said, my friends Kent and Mel and Scott, they're always fun to hang out with. So awesome end to the sheep hunt. It's the only sheep client that I had for this year. And now Dar and I are focusing our attention on the Coues deer season that's staring us in the face here in Mexico. We've got several trips of fully guided Coues deer hunts coming up in the peak of the rut. In January, we're going to go mid-January and try and catch as much of that rutting action down there as we can. And so very quickly focus on getting after it and getting all our supplies. And we're going to go down and make a trip down to Mexico to do some scouting. I'm going to be picking up actually a new Polaris Ranger Crew 1000, a 2018 It's about time my 2011 Polaris Ranger, just the 3-seater, is going to get sold off. I've had it and had some really good hunts and memories out of it, but it's time to get a crew. The thinking on the crew is it's just a bigger machine. I can take more gear, more people, and there seems like in hunting and guiding the coos and the Gould's turkey and the sheep and some of the different animals, there's always an opportunity where being able to take, myself and 3 guys, so 4 total, plus all our gear is huge. They will hold 6, 3 in the front, 3 in the back, which I don't see me doing ever or very often. But definitely there's always opportunities to take, 3 guys plus me and gear. So I'm looking forward to getting this Ranger crew. And I just wanted to update you on the sheep season. And I'm excited. My buddy Craig Steele, Exclusive Pursuit Outfitters, just harvested a great ram in 15D with his client that's going to push over 170. Beautiful flared out 39-inch horns, beautiful ram. Pictures haven't been posted yet on Instagram or anything, but make sure to check that out. That herd has, had the pneumonia and had a, 60-70% die-off. And it was nice for Craig to get a great ram. And I've been getting some other ram photos in from different people I know and such. And it's always just a fun time of year. And just another great sheep season in the books. This one was shorter than I would have liked, but getting a 174-inch ram on the first day, biggest ram, oldest ram in the unit, is hard to beat. And as many long hunts and drawn out and grueling hunts as I've had, sometimes these short ones, you've just got to appreciate them when you can get them. So guys, really appreciate all your support of the podcast. Quite honestly, the numbers are just mind-boggling to me. My wife just shakes her head wondering why all of you guys even listen to me as much as you do. And I just really appreciate the loyalty and the support that you guys show my podcast. And as always, send me an email with your success photos, any questions you have, any comments, anything you want to hear or see on the podcast. And just love interacting with you guys. Send me photos that I can check out. If you've got testimonials for my podcast, I love posting those on my Instagram account. You can follow along if you don't already on my Instagram at jscottoutdoors. You can send me an email, jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. You can follow my website, which doesn't get updated as much as it should, but it's got a lot of valuable information, jscottoutdoors.com. Guys, I just really appreciate. I was at the Ot6 Ranch in Colorado all fall and had a great time taking inventory of the animals there on that ranch in Colorado, and looking forward to next season. Just lots of good things going on. Booking, still have a few spots left for 2018 Gould's Turkey. Also booking for 2019 Gould's Turkey. It's just a fun time to be a hunter, fun time to be an outfitter. I know you guys have got these beginning of December coos deer hunts, and then these middle, I think it's the 15th, 13th, 14th, something like that, start date for these quote-unquote rut hunts in Arizona. I know a bunch of you are going to Mexico as well for either mule deer or coos. So let's just finish out this season strong, finish out this year strong. And thank you so much for your support. I want to thank GoHunt.com Insider for their support of this podcast, Kuiu Ultralight Hunting, Phonescope.com, and the Outdoorsman's. And you can check the show notes to find out the different discounts and such by using the promo codes in the show notes of this podcast. And guys, God bless.